By this point, the Battle of Stalingrad had been going on for nearly 3 months, and hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops had been killed. The situation was getting critical, and the Soviets knew they had to do something quickly to retake Stalingrad. Alright, how bad is it? Well, it is kind of bad. By November 1942, the map around Stalingrad looked a little like this, with the Germans controlling most of the city, and the Soviets basically being pushed back to the eastern bank. But they do everything they can to hold the city and resist the Germans. But the Soviets are also cooking up a plan. They're thinking, why throw men into a meat grinder if you could send them around? Philosophical question. The plan is mainly developed by the legendary Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky alongside Nikolai Voronov. Comrades, here's our plan. We will strike the enemy at their flanks and catch them completely off guard. We will advance towards the middle and trap the 6th Army in our grip. And then with a final blow, we will strangle the invader and free Stalingrad from their hands. We will call the plan Operation Uranus. At first, Stalin wasn't entirely sure if the plan would even work. But after being convinced by his generals, he approved it. The morning of November 19th began by Soviet field engineers planting anti-tank mines along German lines. And what the Germans definitely did not know, freezing to death in the Russian weather, was that massive amounts of Soviet artillery and Katyusha batteries were just being prepared. They had been loaded by 7:20, and 10 minutes later, at 7:30 Russian time, were ordered to fire. The Germans did probably not need an alarm clock that morning. But so, the operation had begun, and the Soviet artillery was hitting German as well as Romanian divisions, and the Romanians were understandably very shaken by the bombardment. But still, when the Soviets finally attacked, they even managed to hold them off. Or, so they thought at least, because a thick fog set in and the Soviet artillery even stopped firing. But they would soon hear the sound of something else. The Romanian 4th Corps were crushed by the Soviet tanks and forced to desperately retreat. And worse yet for the Axis, about half an hour later, the front line about 50 kilometers west was being breached by Romanenko's tank army, and he defeated the Romanian 2nd Corps. The operation was beginning to gain speed. Interestingly, the German 6th Army, which was the Axis' biggest military force, did not receive news of the attack until about 10 o'clock. Which was 5 hours after the start of the attack, if you count by the German time zone. Hans! What is it? We're being invaded. By who? By the Soviets, you Donald Donut. Was? Dispatch the Panzer Corps. Right away, sir. The 48th Panzer Corps was sent out to help the Romanian front lines. Just a few problems. The corps was not equipped with that many tanks and were basically out of fuel. And I mean, there weren't many Romanians left to support. So that was that. Now, it's the 20th November. And you'd think the Soviets would slow down and take it easy now, having completely obliterated the Romanian 2nd and 4th Corps and taken about 30,000 captives. But no, the Southern Soviet armies finally push forward and strike at the Romanian 6th Corps and German 4th Panzer Army, pushing them back and forcing them to retreat. Alongside the Northern Soviet armies, they continue to push deep into German lines at worryingly high speeds, sending German high command into a complete frenzy. And then, on the 23rd November, they finally link up in the middle. The Soviets had now completely encircled the biggest Axis force in the region, the German 6th Army. But not only that, the German 4th Panzer Army, 5th Romanian Corps, 11th German and 8th Corps, all trapped in what would be called the Stalingrad pocket. And how many people do you think were stuck in this glacial wasteland? Maybe 10,000? 50,000? 100? No. 330,000 Axis military personnel. Trapped, freezing, and soon starving. It's safe to say Hitler was in disbelief. And I mean, the situation in the German headquarters and on the front lines probably got even worse when the Soviets pushed them back even more. And while that was happening, they also tried to strangle the Axis forces stuck in the pocket. The German resistance is quite stubborn and significant progress is not really made. Let's check up on the brave, pure Aryan soldiers and see how they're doing. Well, not great. As it so turns out, they were completely surrounded by Soviets, meaning transporting supplies into the pocket was basically impossible. Also meaning that German soldiers began dying of hunger, freezing, and were short on ammunition. Good news for the Kremlin, a disaster for the Wolfslayer. But one German general did have a plan, and his name was Erich von Manstein. And he wanted to launch an assault from the south of Stalingrad, reach the pocket, and free the 6th Army. Otherwise, he feared, the German lines could collapse. So on the 12th of December, Operation Winter Storm is finally initiated. They managed to spearhead quite far into Soviet lines and the advance is quick. They soon come to the realization, however, that their initial victories will be short-lived, because the Soviet defense, alongside the terrible Russian weather, is just too strong. Manstein finally realizes that he's in no way capable of advancing any further, and by the 23rd he's embarrassingly forced to turn back all the way he came. The rescue attempt of the 6th Army, Operation Winter Storm, is a failure. The thing is, it gets even worse, because around that time the Soviets also launch Operation Little Saturn, which basically crushes the Italian 8th Army, who have the front lines a bit more northwest of Stalingrad. And this also basically cut off the German supply lines into the pocket, which meant that a hard situation got absolutely brutal. And Friedrich Paulus, the 6th Army's commander, almost undoubtedly began to realize that the end of German occupation in Stalingrad was only a matter of time. Over the following days, the Soviets finally take initiative and launch an attack of the pocket, nicknamed Operation Ring. The grand finale of the Battle of Stalingrad. One of, if not the most concentrated artillery barrage in the entire Second World War was followed by Soviet ground forces storming the encircled German positions. The fighting is brutal and absolutely relentless, and the Soviets reportedly lost half of their tanks within days of the operation. But the battle continues to rage on, and the Soviet determination to obliterate the 6th Army is ruthless. Casualties are high on both sides, and as the battle moved toward the city, things would get intense for the Germans. By the 26th December, the pocket would be split into two, with one bigger section in the north and one smaller in the south, with Friedrich Paulus, the commander, trapped inside. And with the Soviets tightening their grip, the now two pockets would have extreme difficulties communicating. German coordinated defense would imminently break down and collapse, and although they fight bravely, their chances of in any way winning were all but non-existent. After brutal fighting in the city, by the 31st of January, Soviet forces would surround the building where Paulus had been hiding. He's then captured, taken into Soviet custody, and surrenders. On the 2nd of February 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad is over, and the Soviets had won. The last Germans in Stalingrad would be starved and haunted stragglers, and some who were determined to continue fighting. No one knows exactly when, But at some point, the last German soldier in Stalingrad would finally be killed.